So, welcome to the Treasury Elite Entrepreneur Series. I would like to thank all our viewers and members for supporting this noble cause of Treasury Elite, whose main objective is networking, knowledge sharing, and mentoring. We bring in one stop Treasury performance improvement investment solutions for companies across India. For the last 16 years, today we have Mr. Pranav Pai. Pranav is the founding partner and chief investment officer at 314 Capital, an early stage venture capital fund based in Bangalore. He, along with his brother Siddharth, have invested in multiple startups across India and following the space very closely. Welcome, Pranav. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Abhishek. Great to be here.
Glad to have you today as a part of the Treasury Elite Entrepreneur Series. In the next few minutes, would love to know about your experiences and your entrepreneurial journey. So, Pranav, I asked this question to everyone, and I'm going to ask you again. I think one common thread which a lot of global CEOs or founders would be that they're just not doing this about the money. What keeps you excited every morning and get to work? Or if I may ask, what is your why?
No, thank you. I don't get asked that very often, given we're in venture capital. Yeah, that's a good question. So when Siddharth and I, Abhishek, when we were surveying or thinking about the future that we would have after school, our parents are lawyers, CAs. They come from the services background, professional services background. There are no entrepreneurs, no engineers in our family. So we decided very early. It might sound juvenile now, but literally I was 16, he was 11 or 12, and we decided that we will do different things that eventually we can come together and work in different ways. So we'll build what we learned some new words at times, synergies and so on. So I chose engineering, and he said he would choose commerce, business, CA, which is what we actually ended up doing. So as brothers, that's a interesting way for us to survey our commitment to each other that goes back so many decades. But all jokes aside, the reason we decided to do venture capital together is because it gave us the opportunity, number one, to really think very clearly about a future and work backwards from it. Not too many jobs give you that flexibility. And at the same time, not too many jobs or career paths hold you accountable to your version of the future, right? Most professional jobs, professional careers are very day-to-day, month-to-month, target to target, right? Whereas venture capital, entrepreneurship, a lot of what is being built today in the technology ecosystem globally is working backwards from a vision of the future. And that is a unique opportunity in venture today. So that was what excited us the most. The second is obviously where India is right now. For us, working in India, building value here. I came back from the US. Siddharth decided not to go out, which is a big decision for him. For us, doing something here was important. And thankfully, timing wise, policy wise, the economic growth, obviously the macro environment, and where startups were, this decade seemed to be setting up for a very exciting next decade, and turned out to be obviously true. If we look back even 7-8 years, very different environment in startups. So being here and doing venture, that was very important. So where and what was the offshoot of our why. And for us, very clearly, being young was an advantage. Being highly trained is an advantage. The network we have available to us is an advantage. Building value in India for Indians, working with the environment here, obviously is something very important to us. And long term, we think India is where the future is going to be built. There are only 3 countries that matter: US, China, of course, and India will be the third. And we think that is just too many coincidence layers for us to say no to the opportunity. So that is why we do what we do. We can build the future, we can work together, and we can do something unique for India.
No, I'm sure it's a very, very interesting business. You tend to meet a lot of interesting people, a lot of interesting ideas. And most importantly, I mean, you have the investors and you have to make sure that the fund performs and the investors get the value for what they have invested. I think it's a very, very interesting business. Pranav, everyone has its shares of ups and downs. I would love to know some of your important milestone in during when you guys launched your fund and the first fund, second fund, third fund, and major learnings that you had in your entrepreneurial journey.
No, great question, Abhishek. So when Siddharth and I decided to start a VC firm, I think we were a little bit too audacious for our own good. So if I know now if I knew then what I know now, I think honestly we would have made a different decision, but it worked out thankfully. So let us survey the ecosystem that we have available to us in 2015, right, when we started doing this seriously. Indian VC was still forming. There weren't too many Indian VC firms. If there were VC firms in India, they were global brands, very well-known brands from the US, China, a couple of Japanese firms, Singapore, so on and so forth. All of them had appointed people from outside in. And therefore, the kind of companies being built here, if you remember, were a company successful in the US, successful in China. Let's find an Indian equivalent.
Right.
Number one, we saw very top-down involvement in venture. And we thought that's not how you should build value long-term, because India's problems are bottom-up. India's fundamental innovations need to be bottom-up, and India's business models, if you want to be long-term generational companies, have to be built bottom-up. Right? So even if they were top-down companies, I must say, eventually Flipkart had to innovate in everything from payments to logistics to delivery to packaging. They had to build bottom-up, even though the thesis was top-down. So in that sense, we thought that there's an advantage building an Indian firm from the ground up, which means we have to be Indian, we have to be here, we have to be in Bangalore, very important. We have to raise Indian capital. So we can't go to a sovereign fund in Canada or whatever and say, let us operate your money for you. So we have to get Indian network capital to participate. So when we surveyed, we said, this is a vacuum. There's an open space here, something we can certainly leverage. Another very interesting advantage, very counterintuitive, but I think has worked out for us over the last half a decade, was that venture capital globally is an old boys club. It is dominated by people with 10, 20, 30 years of operating experience, who are lawyers, or they were in large tech companies, they worked at Oracle, SAP, Microsoft, whatever. So very storied careers. And then they leave that to join a VC firm or start one after knowing what roadmaps and technology looks like. And there's a certain weight you need to come to venture capital with to be taken seriously, right? So when I came back to Bangalore from my experience in Silicon Valley, Stanford, and so on. So when I came back, I was reasonably well educated, I must say. So it's not like I'm some fresher, but I said, I must go and meet all the VC firms I can. And Bangalore at that time had maybe say 70% of all the good VCs. So it wasn't difficult. I didn't have to leave the city. Everywhere I went, I must say, I had 3 reactions. And it was very surprising to me because the age I was is typically the age founders are, right? So I had a very different experience meeting VCs in the Valley. They're very warm, very welcoming. For them, young people means, okay, the right guy, please come talk to us. What's going on Stanford? What are you working on? You're in a startup. What are you building? There's an enthusiasm, right? What I saw, unfortunately, here, and I don't want to say anything bad about the industry, was almost a disgust or condescension. That, how old are you? Did you say 27? No, you're too early. Please come back in 10 years, go join a McKinsey or something, go work for a consulting firm, do something before you start investing, right? One investor, VC investor even told me, he's very famous guy, very well-known guy, I can't take his name, but he actually told me, oh, you're raising 50 crores, you already raised. Why don't you give me the money? I'll pay you a commission, let me invest it, put the money in my fund. Why you start the fund? So this was a culture shock for me, not in the sense that I'm not used to old people bullying me. That's part of the game. But it just a little bit strange to see people who are supposed to be so welcoming of young people, a culture of inclusion, so on and so forth, being so high friction when it came to just meeting a young guy starting up, right? I wasn't going to be competition for any of them. Let's be honest. They were all sitting on 500, 600 crore funds. The guys launching 50, 100 crores is not competition. So it was unnecessary. And that experience gave me an understanding of why founders in India had such a bad time raising capital. So a lot of founders will tell you off the record that they have not had great experiences with investors, right? It's a truism, right? And it's difficult to raise money. Also on the VC side, it's difficult to raise money for them also. So there's a lot of friction in the ecosystem. It's getting better every year, but it's hard for everyone, let's be honest. But the cultural shock of this old boys club and not letting you break in and intentionally keeping you out, right? I think it was about time that got disrupted. And I'm happy to say every year there are more young people, not just in India, but globally, right? More women, more young people, more non-IITs, more non-label universities. So I think that's a very good, I would say, evolution of the industry. And obviously we're happy to be a small part of that. So in our firm, we said very clearly in the start, we won't hire IITians, we won't hire consulting people. We didn't even hire an MBA for the first 5 years, to be honest. So all of us were engineers, all of us were operators. We came from having run or worked in a real business. So from CA, from CS, from engineering, software development, product design, so on and so forth. And we're 50% women, completely without quotas, no quota, nothing, no active involvement. The best candidates apply, we hire the best people we can, 50% women. So I must say, if you do this right without an active bias, it's fascinating to see how inclusive the entire industry can become. Right? And the third thing I would say when we thought back is we decided that for some reason, and we had to learn why, there isn't enough Indian capital venture in the venture industry. So most of it, like I said, is global money, pensions, endowments, sovereign funds, so on and so forth. We asked all the entrepreneurs we meet, all the large promoter groups. There's some fascinating businesses in India, obviously, the large IT companies. These are all fantastic promoters, founders, very smart people. And they told us that they don't like investing in venture because, number one, the VC fund managers don't talk about the future in a way they understand. It's all about, sir, it may happen, we don't know. Sir, it'll work this way, it'll work that way. So very unbounded sort of enthusiasm. And number two, the structure of VC didn't make sense. It was very expensive and the returns weren't as high. So what we did is, on an innovation on structure, we reduced all the costs, the overheads. We brought a very strict streamlining of how we design our economics. And I must say, thankfully, we were able to pull it off, and we are the highest performing fund at the lowest possible fee. So in an optional structure perspective, one of the best commercial structures out in the industry. So starting from bottom up, serving all this, doing all this work, going through this friction, whether it was nice that time or not, it gave me a lot of learning. So I'm very happy I went through that. But that is why we are moving much, much faster today, because we've been through that. We know where it comes from and we know what we're going up against. It's very important.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing the journey so candidly with all the viewers who are going to listen. Plus, all the people who are raising money in India without knowing the reality, possibly there should be a reality check. But of course, things are improving, as Pranav said. But with this, Pranav, bring to my next question. In fact, I was very happy to know about the cost structure and everything that you mentioned. The ROI for the investors are very good, and you are a forward-looking firm. And I'm sure people who are investors in this space would take note of that. Having said that, Pranav, in the VC space, if we take 100 rupees as an investable surplus, how much percentage comes from domestic capital and how much international?
Well, unfortunately, Abhishek, not very favorable metrics to report. By our count, even if we're being generous, 90 rupees out of every 100 is coming from outside India.
Correct.
And if you look at the 58 unicorns, I think almost 40 of them are domiciled outside of India. So Singapore, US, that's where they tend to domicile. So it's strange that we are supposed to be a very deep talent country, so many engineers, so many fantastic people in software, obviously very large market, our fintech industry, our edtech industry, amongst the largest in the world. But strangely, our companies are not welcome here. And Indian capital is not welcome in private markets. So what are the clearest signals to look at? To check, does the Indian administrative system welcome Indian capital in private markets or not? The first thing to look at is taxation.
Correct.
Very clear. Global capital, when they invest in private companies, so say a top tier US hedge fund invests in a fintech company, Series B, $100 million. And if they exit in 5 years, they make, say, 300 million. So very good returns. They pay only 11% tax on the gains, right? Long term. In the same investment, say an Indian firm invested 100 million and we made 300 million. So say 750 crores became 3x or 2,100 crores, whatever. We pay 23% tax. Same company, same return, same timeline. But just because we're Indian, we are supposed to pay double the tax. It's outlandish. In most countries in the world, the tax departments bend over backwards to incentivize local capital to come in. They put controls on foreign capital. We don't want banks to own, blah, 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 right?
Correct.
See, complete opposite here. So why would anyone who's, say a successful promoter, a successful bank, they look at the tax structure, they say, why would I invest in any of this private? Right? So I think that's one example. It's a negative example, unfortunately, but it's a reality. We have to understand reality if we want to be successful in venture. So I would say there are many reasons that it's holding us back, but hopefully with more awareness in the regulator, our regulators are very forward thinking. They want to see change. They want to change the incentives. I hope over time, hopefully faster, we are able to make these incentives align with global standards and become a welcoming country for anyone investing in innovation, global or local.
No, Pranav, when outsiders are investing in India, they ask you questions, out of which maybe one is they're concerned about foreign exchange risk, maybe 4-5% depreciation that they see. What are the other concerns that they bring forward in terms of policy or in terms of systems? What have you come across?
Great question, Abhishek. I think the first thing besides the currency and so on is fine. You can adjust for that. That's not new. I think what everyone's waiting to feel and experience in India is policy stability. I don't know why our system of administration just doesn't announce that we will stabilize tax rates for the next 10 years. There will be no change in tax policy for capital gains and so on and so forth. We will stabilize the forex controls for GIFT City, for example, or some other special economic zone in Mumbai, whatever it is. For you to set up a fund, set up your asset management companies, hold your carry units so that taxation is stable. If you just announce basic things that Singapore does very well, we don't need to invent anything. Just look at Singapore, right? Look at Hong Kong. It is phenomenally well. And just say stable centers for you to build your investment businesses, right? That's it. That's all we need, because the market is here, the people are here, the talent is here, the problems to solve are here, right? The only ingredient tying all this together is capital. And if you give capital stability, there's no reason why it won't come here. So the good thing is, with or without that happening, today, after 20 years of a lot of doubts about India, thanks to these IPOs, I would say that's one of the top 3 reasons, a lot of capital has been returned to investors. So now they are saying, we will put more money back into India. So if India was 0.5% of a large global pension fund, now it is 2%, right? So it's a quadrupling. It's still small, but it's a quadrupling. China for them is 10%, 12%, 15%. Because China gave them that commitment in the early 2000s, 2005, 2006, right? Alongside the WTO and so on. They announced a series of capital measures for foreign capital. US universities, global pension funds were all given the red carpet treatment to come set up and invest from Hong Kong and so on. I think that is the reason why you saw Alibaba, Tencent, this huge burst of innovation getting so large so quickly. It didn't happen without the money. So I think if we take that long call and say Indians deserve stability, Indian capital deserves stability, global capital must come work with Indian capital on the same footing, equal partners, build together. I don't see why that won't give the entire world more confidence in India. I would say that's the only thing we need to do now.
No, very rightly said, because when you're raising money from a GP or LP, whatever, in that case, they want numbers on an Excel sheet, which is fixed. They don't want a lot of volatility. So they can understand that this is the kind of return that we are going to get, and this is what we can return back to our investors. So Pranav, with this very important point that you raised, the young kids which are coming out of college now, they're no longer looking at just the next Infosys job, the next TCS job. A lot of these guys, even in my family, people have come up from BITS Pilani and all, they've started up. They got funded also.
Fantastic.
But the point is, of course, I think you might be having the numbers that out of every 10 startup, maybe 8 or 9 doesn't get funded.
Yeah.
1 out of 10 gets funded. And then these people take it by heart at times. What's the message? Since you meet a lot of these young guys in the industry, what's the message you would like to give specifically one-on-one to these guys that, okay, guys, this is the reality. This is what you need to prepare. And if things don't work out, this is what you need to do.
Good question, Abhishek. So someone very important to me told me this when I was in college, right? That made me just eyes wide open on what reality is like. I won't repeat the whole thing because it was a 1-hour conversation, but long story short, in actual reality, not what we are fed, not the textbook, the school version of reality, but the reality that is out there. This is a brutally competitive world today, brutally competitive. There is no hand of God, safety net, nothing. There's really nothing protecting you out there once you're in the real world. Right? Even your parents, there are limitations on what they can do for you. Right? There are 220 million students in school and college today in India, Abhishek. This is more than the population of most countries in the world.
Correct.
Our 10th standard population is larger than most cities in the world. Now, if I was in 10th standard, Abhishek, 10th standard is still the scariest exam I wrote, ICSE. If I was in 10th standard, first of all, I see all the books, I'm going crazy, right? And I have to get 95% and it's absurd pressure. But on top of that, you tell me, buddy, you're writing against 10 million other kids in 10th standard. I don't think I would have woken up on the day of the exam to write it. So the probability of success is so vastly stacked against our students. It's a miserable system. It seeps out your confidence and your ability to think optimistically about the future. And then on top of all this, we expect students to commit to a career path in 12th standard. You can either write engineering or medicine or CA or this or that. How is a kid at 16, 17 expected to commit to a 30-year career without knowing even what they're committing to? And now the complication doesn't stop there. If you commit, I committed to be an engineer. Suddenly, electronics, telecommunication, biotechnology. I don't even know half this stuff. I didn't even know there's a difference between electronics and electrical, for God's sake. Right? And I'm supposed to decide between 3 to 4 departments that have all these words in different combinations. So it's absurd. We've become this quota rationalization system that just doesn't make sense for the student. It makes sense for the lecturer, for the administrator, for the bureaucrat in the planning department. For them, it's all checkboxes. It makes sense. It's a fantastic Excel sheet. Reality, there's no match to reality, right? So my message to students is simple. You are not in a system that prepares you for reality. So game the system, work the system, take the value from it. The system is not what you have to win. You have to prepare to win in reality. Talk to more people who are already working. Talk to more people, your seniors who are already out there. Ask your parents, their friends, your relatives, whatever. Build a map of reality in school. And today, with YouTube, with social media, you have such a deeper access to reality than I had when I was growing up. My version of the world was SWAT Cats on Cartoon Network and some video games that thankfully my friends and I were able to pirate. Right? We weren't even available in India. So that's how we learned about the rest of the world. What is a video game? What is scalar physics? How do you design computing systems? Right? It wasn't taught to us in school. So what I had to do to learn reality is very different from what kids will have to do today. But I must tell you, the challenge is the same. And if Indian kids are allowed to learn reality faster, nothing can stop us in the world, Abhishek. If you can compete with 200 million kids and come out safe and say, I am still going to build a promising career, I'll support my parents, I'll set an example for my younger sister. I see so many kids every day not giving up, which for me is the only reason why I have optimism about India's future, right? If they can come out of the system and still have their optimism, nothing can stop them.
That's a very, very important point, personally. Thank you, Pranav. Thank you for your time and thank you for your insights. I thoroughly enjoyed and learned personally a lot of things from you. And keep sharing the wisdom and your learnings during this journey of yours. And I personally wish you all the very best for all your funds to come. And may you make a $10 billion fund in the next 5 years. I wish you all